Hello and welcome to Control Delete Tutorials. My name is Jason, and in this tutorial we are going to be talking about creating CSV files using Python. So to begin, I just want to show I'm starting out with my file, and we do not currently have a CSV file. Now, the reason I'm creating this tutorial is because I have students that are going to be working on the create task for AP Computer Science Principles, and I wanted to create a video that shows them, one, how to create a CSV file by being able to write their own. We can also get CSV files from different websites, and there are large data sets out there for that. But I wanted to be able to show, one, how do we create a CSV file? Two, how are we going to read that CSV file in as needed for the create task for AP Computer Science Principles, which I'll do as another video. So let's go ahead and get started on this one. So we're going to need a couple of things right off the bat. We have to import CSV. So this is the CSV module. And we're also going to import from the random module the ability to create random integers and random floats. So I'm going to end up just creating a random data set and be able to write a bunch of random information to our CSV file. And then I'm going to use that CSV file in another video showing how to use that CSV file to basically go through parts of the AP Computer Science Principles create task. So as part of that, we're going to go from the random module, we're going to import the rand int function, and I'm going to give this an alias. So an alias is like a nickname that you give to this, and one reason I do that is because it's not that long of a name to write rand int, but sometimes a lot of people associate getting random numbers with a random number generator, so I like to use RNG for that. So basically anywhere I type RNG, it's calling the rand int function. That's how our aliasing here works. Another one we're going to do, because I also want to get random float values, which are our fractional numbers, is I'm going to import from random uniform. So uniform allows us, just like with rand int and getting random integers, I can get random floats using uniform. And I'm not going to alias this one, I'll just leave it as is, because it'd be weird if I had like RNG int and RNG float. It doesn't really save us any text here, so, or any characters, so we're just going to have that. We're going to start by creating an empty list that I'm going to call rand underscore dataset. And that'll just be an empty list. So you can see that those are two square brackets, so that'll be our list. We're going to create a class to hold our random data set information. So we'll start with the class keyword. I'm going to take random data set. So this is a class that I'm just making up. To start off our class, we'll start off with our constructor, and our constructor is going to use the magic method init, which is short for initialize. So here we have def. This is going to be 2 underscores for our initialize for our constructor. So you can see there that's 2, init, again short for initialize, and then 2 more underscore. And in our parameters here, our first parameter is going to reference the class, and we're going to just, that reference is typically going to be put as self. So that just reference or is a way of referencing our class. Okay, and then I'm going to have it so we have another argument in here called name tag. And that's going to basically be something we read in when we create a random data set object. So that's us referencing this class. Okay, so now we're going to go through and create a couple of attributes that all of our random data sets are going to have. So all of these are going to have a name, a color, a random integer, and a random float. I just want to kind of use a bunch of different variable data types in this class just so I can show how those need to be read into our CSV file later on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if our name tag is less than 10, we are going to say that our name, so self.name is the way we set up our attribute, so for this class, the name attribute. So that's what I'm deciding to call it. And again, self is just referencing this class. So I'm going to say self.name, and we're going to have this be an F string so that we can format it. I'm going to format it with name underscore. Now, if the number is less than 10, I know I'm going to just create 1,000 rows basically in our data set. So I want to make it so from 000 to 999, that's going to be my 1,000. I want to make it if the number is less than 10, it starts out with 00, and then in curly braces here. So our F string, so when we have an F in front of here, allows us to put variables directly into our string, and we do that by putting them inside of curly braces or curly brackets, however you want to say that. And that's going to be our name tag. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and select all of this because we're going to copy this. I'm just going to make it a little easier. I'm going to hit enter and backspace and type L, E-L, and paste. That way I can do else if name tag. In this case, if it is less than 100, and I'm going to have a second Boolean expression here. So this is going to be if the name tag is less than 100 and the name tag is greater than 9. So name tag is greater than 9. So if it meets both of those Boolean expressions, if that equates to true, and then in this case, we're only going to put 1 0 in front of it. And finally, we're going to have our else condition. So enter and backspace there, else, and this is going to be same idea here. So we'll copy that, paste, and get rid of that 0. So now, if the number is less than 10, we're going to lead it with 2 zeros. If it's less than 100 and greater than 9, we're going to put 1 0 in front of it. And then anything else, which would be greater than 100, it's going to just put that number in there. Okay, so that's going to set up our name attribute as part of our constructor. Enter 2 times in backspace just to give us a little space. Next, we're going to start with our color attribute. In order to do this, we want to create a integer, a random integer from, I'm going to have just 8 different colors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say rand color index, something like that. That's what I'm going to name my variable, rand color index. And this is going to call on rand int, which we have aliased as RNG. Okay, and so you can see here rand int, I don't know how easy that is to read, but it takes 2 arguments in the parameters. The first one is an int, the second one is an int, and we include both ends of that. So that's just going to be 0 to 7 if I want to have 8 total random numbers here from 0 to 7. So the reason this one doesn't start with self is because this is only going to be accessed here in our constructor, whereas these attributes can be accessed as part of the class. So this one will not be accessed outside of the class, just inside the class. And it's going to let us set up our color attribute. So here what we're going to do is we're going to say if our random color index is 0, that's going to be red. If it's 1, it's orange. If it's 2, it's yellow, and so on. So we're going to go ahead and set that up. So if our rand color index, 2 equal signs because we're comparing the left side here to the right side. So if rand color index equals 0, because that's our first number that's going to show up in our list, we're going to say self.color equals, and I'm doing this as a string, red. Okay, now I'm going to do the same idea, just copy this. So we don't want to have to keep typing, enter and backspace, L, paste. Okay, in this case we're going to have 1. And this one's going to be orange. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and select from here all the way up to right before red. Copy, put my cursor right here, and I'm going to paste a few times. So this one will be number 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So let's go ahead and number those. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And this will be red, orange, yellow. We're not fully going to follow Roy G. Biv here, but it'll be kind of close. Okay, green, blue, and then I decided to go with pink and purple. And then finally, if it's not 0 through 6, it has to be 7. So we're going to say else self.color equals, and I'm just going to do black. Now, if you were doing something else where you were grouping any other information, I chose colors just because it's simple to do colors. But if I wanted to do different teams or different, other different ways that I could group things, that's what I would do here. So I'm just trying to keep it very sort of basic so that you could see, oh, okay, I could switch this out, and these are like team names, and I could put teams in here, and I could build different teams. But we're just doing this to set up a basic file, because it's going to be a lot faster to let the program write the CSV file than us to manually go in and write 1,000 different randomly generated elements or items in a list. Okay, now that we've got all of our colors, the next thing we're going to do is set up our random int and our random float attributes. So I'm going to hit enter 2 times and backspace. It doesn't really matter that I do that. I just do that because I like the spacing. Okay, so this one is an attribute, so we do put self first. And we're going to say random underscore int equals, and this will be another RNG. Okay, in this case, I'm going to go 0 to 9. Okay, by the way, right here, doesn't matter if I have a space here or not. This is all based on your preference. White space here isn't going to matter. Okay, so that'll give us our rand int, and then self dot random underscore float, and we're going to use uniform in this case. So that'll be uniform, and I'm going to go from 0.0 to 9.9. Now, here's the thing. I actually don't want to get numbers like 0.156784. A float, I could get a huge range of things here. So I actually want to round this just to the nearest first decimal place. So the way I can do that is in front of uniform, I can start writing the round function. So round, left parentheses, and remember, anytime we have a left parentheses, we got to have that matching right parentheses to close that out. So that means that the uniform function is in between here. Now there's a second argument called n digits that round takes. So if I put 1, that means it's going to round this number out to 1 decimal, which is what I want. If you needed 2 decimals, you could put a 2 in there, and that'll round out 2 decimals. Okay, and that's basically going to do it for our random dataset class. So again, it's got a name attribute, a color attribute, a random int attribute, and a random float attribute. Enter 2 times, backspace 2 times. Now we're exited from that class. Now we can start writing some other functions. Now, I write a lot of functions that may not be super necessary because you can in Python write different parts of code in just the main block of code here, but I like to keep things a little more organized than that. So if it seems weird that I'm just writing functions to write functions, that's just the way I do things. Okay, so I'm going to write a function here called makeList. And this is going to allow me to generate my list. The parameters, there's no arguments, so we just leave that blank. I'm going to hit enter. It should indent. If it doesn't indent, remember, you forgot to put a colon here. Got to have a colon when we're writing our functions. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to generate every single line of my CSV file data. Now, this isn't the actual CSV file. This is just the data I'm putting into it. So what I'm going to do is create a for loop. And remember, for loops use a format of for item in collection. So our item here is just going to be a variable that I'm going to call I. Okay, that's the letter I choose to use for iterating through things, so I. And then we're going to use the in keyword, so we're looking for an item in our collection. Our collection is going to be a range of numbers from 0 to 1,000. Now, if I put 0 to 1,000, it's not going to include that second number. Also, if I'm starting at 0, I can just put 1,000. I don't have to include 0. If I wanted to start from 1, then I have to put 1 to whatever number I'm going to. But in that case, if I was getting 1,000 entries, it would have to be from 1 to 1,001. Okay, so we're just going for 1,000 entries. Again, that is 000, or just 0 to 999. Okay, this number is not inclusive. Okay, we hit enter. This is going to indent. We're going to create a temporary variable that's going to hold the place of one of our data set items or objects. And I'm just going to call this temp data set item. Data set. It doesn't matter if we have that space in there or not, but I'm just trying to write it like this. All right, so this is a temporary data set item, which is going to call on our random data set class. And so we're creating an object that's based on basically like a blueprint we made in our class. And you can see here, and it may be hard to see in the video, but right here it says name tag. Okay, that's because we told it it's going to take a name tag, and that name tag is going to be an integer. Now, the integer I want is I. Okay, so if this is for I in range 1000, when this for loop first runs, it's going to be 0, and then 1, and then 2, and then 3, all the way up to 1000. So the only thing I'm putting in here is I. Okay, that I is then being used in this argument as name tag. So here it says if 0 is less than 10, which it is, then my naming will be 000 for the name tag. Okay, if it's 1 is less than 10, that's true, 001. Okay, once this is over 9, it's going to go into this next part here. And so it'll be 010 because the name tag will be 10 at that point because it's greater than 9. So that's how that's working. So we're creating a temporary object, and then we're going to add that object to our list. And the next time the for loop runs, it's going to replace this random asset or this random object, and then add it as it is to our list again 1,000 times until we have our 1,000 items. So here we're going to say, let's call on our list. So we created our random data set list up top. Okay, that's this list. Again, it was empty when we created it, nothing in it. Okay, now the way we add something is all lists have an append method that is part of the list class. So append, and since it's a method, it has parameters. And what goes in the parameters? The object. So our object we're adding to our list is our temp data set item. So I'll copy that. I like to copy things just that way I don't accidentally type them in incorrectly. And I think it's a good habit to get into if you can. All right, that's going to be the end of our make list function. I'm going to enter 2 times, backspace 2 times, and then we're going to create a start function. Now I like to have my start function and keep all of my basic code in here, kind of like you would have main in another like a main function in another programming language. Okay, so I'm going to have start. First thing start is going to do is going to call the make list function we wrote. Okay, and then I'm going to hit enter and backspace here, and I'm going to call start. So calling just means that this is the first thing that my code really is going to not necessarily see, because it does create some other stuff up here, but it tells it go here. This tells it to go here. After it is finished making the entire list, it's going to come back here. It'll return back here, and then we'll do the next part of our code. I don't want you to think I just made an entire function to run another function when I could have just ran that from down here. That's not what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm making sure that certain things are happening first. I'm making my list. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to print out all of the information in my list just to test it out and make sure it works. So the way we do that is we're going to do a for loop. So this is going to be for, I'm just going to call it item, in our random data set. So that's rand data underscore set. And once again, we can just look up here and make sure we spelled it the same. And we did. Hopefully you did. Okay. Colon. So now what I'm going to do is, this is going to go through every item that's been added to our list. We know our list is created because we made the list before doing this. So now at this point, if I just highlight over here, it can tell me it's a list of random data sets. That's what it says in the message here. Okay, so each item is a data set object. It's from this class, which means that every item has a name, has a color, has a random int and a random float. So now I'm going to print those out from each item. Hopefully that makes sense. So I'm going to print. I'm going to use an F string because I'm going to be putting variables directly into my message. I'm going to start with some labels here. So name, colon, and then what is the name of item 1 or the first item in my list? I'll go with my curly braces. I'm going to call item because that's what I'm calling each individual item in my list. And then I can call the name attribute from that item. Okay, so this is this item's name attribute. When I'm in the class, it's self.name. When it's outside of the class, when I'm referencing it, it's whatever it is, .name, its name. That's what I mean that in the class, self references the class. Ooh, don't do that. References the class. Outside of the class, this is the reference to that class. Okay, I'm going to duplicate this 4 times. And then I'm going to finish off by saying print here. Now I could either do a blank print like this, or up here I can say \n inside of my string. And this just means print a new line. For some people that's kind of confusing, and this is easy for them to see that I'm just printing a blank line in between each of my things here. So all of my labels are color, and this is item.color. So here we can see item.color, up here is self.color. Okay, item.color. Okay, then we have the integer. So this will be a random integer. Okay, hopefully my spelling's working here. And if I go up, I can see we've got a random int. I'm just going to copy it from there. Copy, paste. Okay, I want to make sure it's spelled exactly the same. And then finally we have random float. Now, I know I said we were going to be making CSV files, and I'm doing a lot of other things, but we have to create the data that's going in there first. And we'll make it in just a minute. All right, before we make our file, we want to test that all this information works. So for each item in our random data set, we're going to print out the name of that item, the color of that item, the random integer we stored, and the random float that we stored. So we're going to test this before we do anything else. I'm going to scroll up here a little bit just in case you're still looking at some of the code. All right, now this is going to run through and it's going to generate all 1,000 of those different items and print them out. And you can see it does take a minute here. And you can see the last item in the list is 999. And you can see these are indeed random. Orange, pink, red, yellow, red, black, 7, 1, 0, 0, 2, 7. So there's no discernible pattern. You can see our floats print out with just 1 decimal place because we rounded it. And if we go all the way up, where's my slider? There it is. Okay. You can see name 000, so we have that naming so that it's giving us those leading zeros for all the names. Okay. And there you can see all the data. Now we need to write the CSV file. Okay, and we're still going to do that in our start function. Now, from this point, we don't really need this, but I'm going to leave it here so when we create the CSV file, we can compare and make sure everything matches up. So let's go to the end of print. We're going to hit enter 2 times, backspace 1 time. So we've gone through this for loop. The list has already been generated. We're just reading at this point. Now we're going to write it to our CSV file. Now we do that using a with statement. Now the with statement is really nice because when we use a with statement to open and close the file, it's going to handle the opening and closing automatically. Whereas if I manually go in and open the file in Python, I have to manually close the file. So this makes it a little easier. So we say with open, and open is a function here. So you can see, or maybe you can't, it says the first thing we're looking for is the file, the mode, and then it has some other things here we can kind of talk about. So first we have our file. The file is going to be a string. This is the name we are giving the file. So we're going to do random underscore dataset dot CSV. That's the file name. Okay, we have the mode. So there are a couple different modes. The typical one is reading and writing. So these are always used as a string. So if I have R, that would be for writing or reading the file. And if I have W, that's for writing the file. There's some other ones. You can look up documentation by just going to Google and type in Python CSV read write. You'll pull up the API that talks about everything to do with writing and reading Python files. And that'll be a little bit more information than what this video will provide, but this is going to be a good starting point for you. Okay, so here we are going to write new line, runtime warning. I don't know why it would be showing that. I think it's just because I haven't finished this. Okay, so this is going to be new line equals, and our new line is just going to be an empty string. Okay, it's empty because there's nothing in between the two quotes. Okay, by the way, you're allowed to use single quotes and double quotes in Python, in case you're unaware of that. I use different languages, so I like using double quotes. Okay, this just means there won't be a new line at the beginning of our file. Okay, so we have open, we have the file, we have the write as our mode, and we have new line set to an empty string. The last thing we need to do here is just say this file, and we're kind of given an alias here. This file that we've opened, we're going to end up just calling this CSV underscore file in this part of our code. Okay, so make sure that comes before the colon here. Okay, so that means all of this information has been stored as CSV file. Now when we hit enter, it's going to indent for us. We're going to create the file that we are writing. So this is going to be a reference to the writer class of the CSV module. So here I'm going to call this file to write. Okay, we're going to set that to open, or sorry, equals. So that's our assignment operator, CSV dot writer. Okay, so a writer is looking for what is our file. You can see here, by default, it says CSV file. Again, might be hard to read, but that's this file we just opened. So we're telling it write to this file. Okay. Next, we can go ahead and write some lines of information to our CSV file, and that's going to be file to write as well. Okay, file to write. And the command for that is going to be write row. Okay, write row. Now, write row, in the parameters, it takes a list, and that list is going to be our header. These are going to be how the different rows show up in our CSV file. So it's basically your first row, your header row. So to write a list, we use the square bracket notation for our list. Inside of the list, we are going to say what information we want to show up in that header. And those will be as a string. So name, and then comma for the next part of the row. So this is going to be our color. Ooh, not sure our spelling there. Okay, comma for our next part in our list. That's going to be int. And then finally, comma after that, float. Okay, those are our attributes that we had up here, all the data that's stored. We have the name, we have the color, we have the integers and floats. Okay, that's how we are heading our file. I'm going to hit enter 2 times, and I'm going to create a for loop that basically is going to do what we did here, where it takes all of our information, but it's going to write it to our file using write row. So we're going to say for item in our rand dataset. Okay, just like we did above, we're going to do file, and that's going to be file to write. Okay, dot right row. Okay, now what is going to be in our list? So our first item in the list is going to be item.name. Now we don't have to format this one because item.name is already a string. Okay, we put a comma before the next item in our list. We have our color. Our color is also a string, so we can see up here, colors are all strings, so we don't have to format that one either. So that will be item.color. Okay, the next one is an integer. Now our integer can't be read into the file as an integer. It's not going to allow us. So we can format it using, or convert it using the string function. Okay, so what is it I want to convert to a string? Item dot random int, and then the last part is same idea, string, because we're using a float. And inside of our string function, that would be item dot random float. Okay, and you can see there it's a pretty long line, but that's going to add everything to our file. Okay, let's go ahead and save. Make sure we have everything: item name, item color, item rand int, item rand float, and we have our parentheses here for our right row. Yeah, everything looks good. So let's go ahead and run the file. Now, when we run the file, it's automatically going to write the file. Just to show you, here is my directory where I'm saving everything. Nothing in here that's called random data set. Okay, so when I go and run this, it's going to generate all of my items in my list. And once it completes, it's going to create my file. I'll wait for that here. Okay, now it writes the file a lot faster than it prints all these out for us, which is really nice. If I bring this up, we can see right here, random data set, and I go over, it's only 22 kilobytes, so it's a pretty small file. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up, and I'm going to compare it to our information here. So we can see the last thing in the list should be name 999, color should be yellow, the random integer will be 6, and the random float will be 4.3. So we'll open this up, we'll make sure our information matches. And like I said, in the next video, and again, you don't have to watch the next video if you don't want to, but the next video is going to cover reading this file. Alright, so if I go to the bottom, as soon as it allows me to, taking a second here. But in the next video, what we're going to end up doing is we're going to read in this file. And I know it seems silly to read it in once we've just created it. And let me zoom this in here. But I want to show how we can use this file for something like the AP Computer Science Principles Create task, which is the programming task part of the exam. Alright, so we can see last item in the list was 999, it is yellow, 6, and 43. And again, we can see that's the same info here. If I go to the top, we can see 0 is red, 6, 5.5. I'm going to go ahead and close that. And if we go to the top, okay, red, 6, 5.5. So we can see it generated the file appropriately. Now, when we read this file in, it's going to be a little bit different because we're going to go in reverse. We're going to use read instead of write. But we'll do that in the next video. So please stay tuned for the next video and just kind of watch out for that. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you didn't like this video, please give me a thumbs up anyway because nobody views my channel.